Number 1. The Slide Rock Bolter. Colorado high country, early 1900s. In logging camps where slopes fell away like broken stairs, workers told newcomers about the Slide Rock Bolter. They said it was a mountain whale, huge as a cabin, hiding above timberline with its hooked tail locked around a ridge. Below, men heard stones crack loose and watched dust rise from ravines without warning. The tale entered print in William T. Cox's 1910 book of fearsome creatures, but it sounded older, like something polished beside campfires. The bolter supposedly waited on grades steeper than 45 degrees, then released its tail and shot downhill, oiling the rock with slippery drool. Trees, cabins, and tourists had no chance at all to flee downhill. Of course, no giant whale ever patrolled Colorado's peaks. The story was a joke with a warning inside it. Miners and timber crews knew rock slides could sweep a canyon clean in seconds, especially after rain, snowmelt, or blasting. Instead of giving a dry safety lecture, they gave the danger teeth, a tail, a name, and a hungry mouth to remember. It makes the mountains feel alive, not evil, just powerful and quick to punish carelessness. When gravel rattles above a trail and the whole slope seems to breathe, you can almost picture that impossible creature letting go one more time from the cliffs above. Number 2. The Legend of Silver Heels. Buckskin Joe, Colorado, 1861. The mining camp was loud with picks, poker, and stagecoaches when a young dancer arrived wearing shining shoes. No one agreed on her real name, so the miners called her Silver Heels. In a place built on silver dreams, she became the brightest figure in the room, kind, graceful, and remembered by every lonely man there. Then smallpox reached the camp, and joy turned into fear. Many people fled toward safer towns, but stories say Silverheels stayed. She carried water, cleaned sick rooms, and cared for miners too weak to rise from their beds.
I'm right here.
In a rough camp where money usually came first, her courage became worth more than any claim in South Park that winter. The disease finally caught her too, quietly. She survived, but the illness left scars on the face everyone had once praised. When the miners collected money to thank her, she was gone, hidden somewhere in the mountains. They never found her, so the memory moved on to the map. Mount Silverheels rose above South Park, with her name for all to see. People say, a veiled woman sometimes returns with flowers for old graves, as if she never stopped nursing the forgotten. Whether she was one woman or a story shaped by gratitude, Silverheels remains Colorado's quiet reminder that beauty can be an act of mercy in the darkest season of all, even without her true name. Number 3. Charlie Dinneback at Walrus Ice Cream. Fort Collins, Old Town. Beneath the cheerful counter of Walrus Ice Cream, old rooms and tunnels hold pieces of another business. Before scoops and cones, Charlie Dinneback ran Dinneback's Cafe here, greeting customers with the pride of a man who knew half the town. He died in 1940, but the stories say he never fully left the building below, where old brick holds sound. Employees describe Charlie as friendly, not frightening. Faucets turn on when no one is near them. Supplies shift places after closing. A worker might feel a playful tug near the ankle, then turn to find only the humming coolers and the smell of waffle cones. It feels less like a haunting than a prank from a familiar neighbor checking the place. That fits the history people remember. Charlie was a local businessman and booster, the kind of person who made a storefront feel like part of the community. When Walrus Ice Cream opened in the same Old Town space decades later, the ghost story gave the shop something most businesses cannot buy: a house spirit with manners and a local name. So the legend of Charlie Dinneback is not about terror in a basement. It is about a town keeping one of its old characters alive through laughter, footsteps, and small surprise. If a faucet runs by itself below Walrus Ice Cream, people do not scream for so long. They smile and wonder if Charlie just wanted a little attention again before closing again. Number 4. The Fur-Bearing Trout. Salida, Colorado, 1938. The Arkansas River was already famous for cold mountain water, but one Depression-era story made it stranger. Newspapers and travelers heard that local trout had grown thick coats of fur to survive the freezing current. The fish, people joked, shed their winter pelts when summer warmed the valley again each year. The fur-bearing trout sounded almost believable if you had ever stepped into snowmelt. The tale said anglers had to comb their catch before cooking it, and that unlucky fishermen sometimes mistook the furry fish for swimming rabbits. It was silly, but it was told with a straight face, which made outsiders lean closer and laugh at the absurd detail of it. Behind the joke was a clever bit of tourism. Local boosters around Salida used the hoax to draw real attention during hard economic years, when towns needed visitors, headlines, and anything cheerful enough to travel by word of mouth. Stuffed examples appeared, stories spread, and Colorado gained one of its funniest scientific wonders for travelers who wanted a smile. That is the charm of the fur-bearing trout. It never needed to be real to do its job. It turned cold water, hard times, and mountain humor into a legend people still repeat. Somewhere along the Arkansas, when the river bites your skin with ice, the story feels possible for one quick second, and that is enough to keep it alive in the cold current. Number 5. The Stanley Hotel. Estes Park, 1909. The Stanley Hotel opened above the valley like a white palace from another world. Freeland Oscar Stanley, known for the Stanley Steamer automobile, had come to Colorado for his health and fell in love with the mountain air. With his wife Flora, he built a grand resort. The hotel had electric lights, fine rooms, music, and views that made guests slow their steps. Flora loved music, and stories say her piano still answers the quiet ballroom after dark. Some hear notes when no player sits at the keys. Others claim F.O. Stanley appears in halls or the billiard room, still checking his beloved hotel with quiet pride. In 1974, writer Stephen King stayed there near the end of the season, when the building felt nearly empty. That lonely visit helped inspire The Shining, but the Stanley's own ghost stories are often gentler than the book it influenced. Guests speak of soft music, children's laughter, helpful spirits, and shadows that seem more curious than cruel to the living. That is why the Stanley Hotel remains one of Colorado's most famous haunted places. Its legend is not only darkness, it is history refusing to check out. When the wind moves across Estes Park and the windows glow at night, the hotel feels awake, as if the Stanleys are still welcoming guests from the other side. Number 6. The Tommyknockers. Colorado mining country, late 1800s, deep under Leadville, Central City, and other boomtowns. Miners listened as much as they dug. A soft tap in the rock could mean a rich vein nearby, or a warning before the ceiling cracked. Cornish miners had brought an old belief with them from Britain, the small mine spirits called Tommyknockers, known from Cornish tin country. They were described as tiny men, sometimes greenish, wearing little miner clothes and carrying tools of their own. Some workers left bits of food for them, not because they wanted a joke, but because underground life was dangerous. A bad day could begin with one loose timber, one missed sound, or one pocket of bad air in the dark. The Tommyknockers fit perfectly into Colorado's gold and silver rush years. Mines were loud, cold, and full of echoes, so unexplained knocks were easy to hear and hard to forget. Skeptics could blame shifting stone, dripping water, or distant hammering from another crew. Believers said the little miners were helping, teasing, or telling men to leave before the mountain fell. That is exactly why the legend stayed in the shafts long after the boom years faded. It gave miners a way to speak about fear without sounding afraid. When an old tunnel groans or one tap answers from behind the wall, the question still feels alive. Was it only rock settling, or was a Tommyknocker giving one final warning from the dark? Number 7. Baby Doe Tabor. Leadville, Colorado, 1880s, Elizabeth Baby Doe lived a story that felt larger than the mountains. She married Horace Tabor, the famous Silver King and Colorado politician, when Leadville silver made fortunes overnight. The matchless mine on Leadville's Friar Hill had helped build that glittering world, with fine clothing, grand rooms in Denver, and Denver society watching every move. Then the price of silver collapsed after the 1893 repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. Horace lost his wealth, and when he died in 1899, his last plea became legend. Hold on to the matchless. Baby Doe believed him. She fought creditors, signed papers, borrowed money, and kept returning to Leadville, even as the old bonanza faded. By the 1930s, she was living near the mine in a plain cabin, far from the life people once gossiped about. Historical records show her story was more complex than the poorest versions of the tale, but it still ended in loneliness. In February 1935, at age 81, she died at the Matchless, and her body was not found until March. Lights seem to shift, photographs move, and visitors feel a stubborn presence beside the weathered boards. Maybe it is only wind moving through a mining site, or maybe a woman who lost everything except a promise, is still keeping watch over the silver dream that ruined her. Number 8. The Sleeping Giant of Elk Mountain. West of Steamboat Springs, Elk Mountain in Routt County lies across the horizon like a sleeping body. Long before ski lifts and busy streets, the Yampa Valley was home to Ute people and later to trappers, ranchers, and settlers who learned the shape of the land by sight. The mountain's profile made people imagine a giant resting with his face turned toward the wider Colorado sky. The story says he was a gentle giant who loved the valley and protected its people. He was promised eternal life as long as he never harmed another living thing. But when a cruel ogre threatened the valley, the giant lured him toward quicksand near Steamboat Lake. The people were saved, but the giant had broken his sacred promise. So the valley put him to sleep, not as punishment alone, but as a sorrowful kind of honor. In another version, rattlesnakes were gathered around the mountain to guard him from being disturbed. That detail gave the story a local warning, too. This beautiful place deserved respect, and not every slope should be treated like a playground. Today, the sleeping giant is tied to the famous Yampa Valley curse, the feeling that visitors leave Steamboat but keep wanting to return. Maybe the curse is only mountain air, wide sky, and memory. Still, when sunset settles across Elk Mountain, the giant seems almost ready to breathe. Number 9. Emma Crawford and the Racing Coffin. Manitou Springs, 1889. Emma Crawford arrived hoping the mountain air and cold mineral springs would help her tuberculosis. She was a young concert pianist, a woman with music in her life and little time left. The town, tucked under Pikes Peak, must have felt bright and strange to her, with healing waters, steep roads, and Red Mountain rising above everything like a promise. Emma loved that mountain so much that before she died in 1891, she asked to be buried near its summit. Her fiancé, Wilhelm Hildenbrand, a civil engineer connected with the Pikes Peak Cog Railway, honored the wish. With help from 11 townspeople, he carried her coffin up the 7,200-foot slope and laid her there above Manitou. But mountains change. Years of harsh winters and spring rains weakened the grave site, and in 1929, Emma's coffin came loose and slid down Red Mountain. Children later found pieces of the casket, a nameplate, handles, and a few remains. It was sad, strange, and unforgettable, the kind of event that turned a private wish into a public legend almost overnight. Decades later, Manitou Springs chose to remember Emma with humor instead of fear. Since 1995, teams have raced coffin-like carts through town each October during the Emma Crawford coffin races. Behind the costumes is a tender story, a woman who wanted to rest on a mountain, a town that never forgot her, and a slope that gave her one last wild ride. Number 10. The Postman of the Cruise Room. Denver, 1891. The Oxford Hotel opened near Union Station, designed by Frank E. Edbrook, just as the city was growing from frontier stop into a polished Western capital. Decades later, its basement bar became the Cruise Room, an Art Deco lounge inspired by the RMS Queen Mary and born the day after Prohibition ended in 1933. Red light, mirrors, carved panels, and old glamour made it feel like a secret below downtown. That is exactly where the postman legend walks in. Stories say a man in an old postal uniform enters the cruise room, sits at the bar, and orders a beer, as if he is still on a dangerous winter route he never finished. The tale places him in the 1930s, when mountain roads could turn deadly with snow and cold. In the legend, he stopped for a drink before carrying Christmas presents west into the hills, but never made it. When bartenders later clear his spot, the beer is said to be untouched, still full, though everyone remembers him drinking it. The cruise room's ghost is sad because he is not trying to scare anyone. He is late, lost, and still faithful to a job that ended long ago. Number 11. The Phantom Train of Marshall Pass. Marshall Pass, 1880s. Denver and Rio Grande pushed narrow-gauge rails over one of Colorado's toughest crossings. The line climbed above 10,000 feet between Salida and Gunnison, where snow, darkness, and steep grades made every trip feel like an argument with the mountain. Engineer Nelson Edwards knew the route, but one winter night changed it. As the story goes, Edwards was guiding his train through the cold pass when a whistle screamed behind him. A black freight train appeared on the same track, smoke pouring from its stack, and its headlamp grew larger by the second. Edwards opened the throttle, trying to outrun what should have been impossible, while the canyon swallowed the sound and rails shook. Just before the crash, the phantom train seemed to leave the track and vanish into the gorge below. No wreck was found. No crew was missing. Yet when Edwards reached the next station, the tale says a frosty message marked his window, warning him never to cross Marshall Pass again. He quit soon after, and the legend stayed with the railroad. The real line was abandoned in the 1950s, but the story still rides the empty grade. Wind moves through old cuts where trains once labored, and the pass feels made for echoes. Maybe Edwards saw steam, moonlight, and fear combined into one terrible shape, or maybe something still races those rails, always gaining, never arriving, and vanishing before the crash. Number 12. The Cactus Cat. Southwestern Colorado frontier, late 1800s, cowboys, miners, and travelers traded stories about strange noises in the desert after dark. One of the oddest was the cactus cat, a wildcat said to be covered in thorny hair with sharp blades on its front legs and a branching tail like a living cactus. It sounded ridiculous, but that was part of the fun. The tale said the cat slipped through cactus country at night, slicing deep cuts into the plants and letting the juice drip out. Later, when the sap had fermented, it returned to drink until it staggered across the moonlit flats, yowling like a fiddle being scraped with a knife. For lonely men around a fire, that explained every eerie cry beyond the camp. Folklore collectors later placed the cactus cat among America's fearsome critters, those impossible animals born from work camps and frontier humor. The creature was never meant to be a museum specimen. It was a joke with dust on its boots, a way for people to laugh at a hard landscape full of real thorns, real thirst, and real predators. That is why the cactus cat remains such a perfect desert legend. It turns sharp plants, night sounds, and cowboy exaggeration into one prickly little monster. When a cactus bears strange scars, or a cry lifts out of the dark, the mind still reaches for the old answer. Maybe it was only wind, or maybe the cactus cat had been drinking again under the cold stars. Number 13, the Hatchet Lady of Red Rocks. Morrison, Colorado. Before Red Rocks became one of America's most famous amphitheaters, the sandstone formations already felt ancient and watchful. Denver bought the park in the late 1920s, and New Deal workers later shaped the stage and seats by hand. By the time concerts filled the rocks, teenagers gave the shadows a guardian, the Hatchet Lady. The legend says she once lived as a hermit among the caves and red stone, pushed aside as roads, trails, and the venue grew around her. After death, or maybe after memory, changed her into something stranger, she became the park's midnight warning. People said she wore ragged clothing, moved fast, and carried a hatchet to chase anyone breaking rules after dark. Her story fits the place because Red Rocks has always mixed beauty with danger. The cliffs glow warm at sunset, but the same rocks become black walls at night. Young visitors sneaking around after closing could scare themselves with every crunch of gravel. A distant shout, a moving shadow, or a park worker's flashlight could become a ghost with a blade. Still, the Hatchet Lady survives because she feels like Red Rocks itself, taking human shape. She is not a monster hunting families. She is a warning to respect the park when the music ends. When the seats empty and wind slides between ship rock and creation rock, it is easy to imagine her watching from the dark. Number 14, the Side Hill Gouger. Colorado mountain camps, early 1900s. Workers loved explaining the strange marks of the wilderness with animals no scientist had ever seen. One favorite was the Side Hill Gouger, a creature built for steep slopes. It had legs longer on one side than the other, so it could walk comfortably around a mountain, but only in one direction, forever circling the same hill. The joke was simple and clever. If a trail wrapped neatly across a hillside, someone could blame generations of gougers pacing the same route. If a man got dizzy or lost after following a slope too long, the story made him laugh instead of swear. In some versions, left-legged and right-legged gougers could not even travel together without disaster. The Side Hill Gouger belonged to the family of fearsome critters, tall-tale beasts shared by lumberjacks, hunters, and miners across North America. Henry H. Tryon included it in his 1939 collection, giving the absurd animal a place in printed folklore. Like many camp legends, it made hard country feel less lonely by turning geography into comedy. It explains nothing, and somehow explains everything. Odd paths, steep ground, tired feet, and the need for a good laugh at the end of a dangerous day. When a narrow trail cuts sideways across a Colorado hill, you can still picture the little beast moving slowly around the slope, unable to turn back. Number 15. The Columbine Lady of Central City. Central City, Colorado. The old Masonic cemetery sits above a mining town that once rang with gold rush noise. By the late 1800s, fortunes had risen and fallen there, and many young lives ended far from the places where they began. Among the graves is John Edward Cameron, a Canadian-born man who died in 1887 at only 28 years old. His grave became the center of one of Colorado's gentlest mysteries. Visitors say that twice a year, often named as April 5th and November 1st, a woman dressed in black appears among the stones. She wears a heavy veil and moves quietly through the cemetery, carrying columbines or roses. Then she places the flowers near Cameron's grave and disappears into the trees. No record has proven who she was. Some call her a lover. Others think she was a relative, a secret admirer, or only a story born from real flowers found at the grave long after anyone expected them. That uncertainty makes the legend stronger. Central City already has enough rough mining tales. This one feels softer, shaped by loyalty and grief. The Columbine Lady is not frightening because she does not chase, shout, or knock on windows. She simply returns year after year to remember someone the world almost forgot. When fog hangs over the cemetery and cold headstones lean in the grass, her story feels like a promise. Even in a boom town built on money, love may be the thing that stays longest. Number 16. The Augarino. Middle Park, Colorado, 1941. Ranchers and ditch riders had a problem no one found funny. Irrigation water vanished from channels, banks caved in, and precious flow slipped away before reaching hayfields. In the Journal of American Folklore, Robert L. Ives recorded the local answer. A dry country monster called the Augarino whispered about with straight faces. The creature was said to be shaped like a giant corkscrew worm, built for boring through earth. It hated wet places, so it drilled holes through dams and irrigation ditches to drain the water out. Some storytellers even claimed its tunnels were lined with silica, smooth and hard, so no wall of dirt could collapse behind it when it escaped below. Like many Colorado tall tales, the Augarino made daily trouble sound magical. A farmer could blame cracked clay, thirsty soil, bad engineering, or burrowing animals. But blaming a sneaky underground beast was easier to remember, and much more fun after a long day of trying to keep water moving across a dry valley where every gallon mattered. That is why the Augarino still belongs to Colorado folklore. It came from a real worry. Water was life, and losing it could ruin a season. Number 17. The Water Boy of the Hotel Jerome. Aspen, Colorado, 1889. The Hotel Jerome opened during the Silver Boom, built by businessman Jerome B. Wheeler as a grand hotel for a mining town that wanted to look rich and permanent. It had electric lights, elegant rooms, and a famous bar. Over time, the town changed, but the Jerome survived crashes, winters, and quiet years when Aspen nearly emptied. The best-known ghost story comes from 1936. According to local legend, a family staying near room 310 had a young son who drowned in the hotel pool. Years later, guests and workers began speaking of a shivering boy wrapped in a towel, standing in the hallway as if he had just climbed out of the water and needed help finding his family. People call him the water boy. Some stories say he leaves wet footprints across the floor or a damp patch where he had been standing. A guest turns to help him, and he is gone. The detail that makes the tale linger is not terror, but sadness. The child seems lost, cold, and waiting for someone to notice him before he vanishes again. That is why the Hotel Jerome's haunting feels different from a simple scare. The building holds Aspen's silver boom pride, its Depression-era survival, and the polished ski town glamour that came later. But somewhere in the old halls, the water boy keeps the story small and human. A wet footprint appears, and the past feels close enough to touch before the hallway dries. Number 18. The Spirits of Gold Camp Road Tunnels. West of Colorado Springs, Gold Camp Road follows the old railroad grade that once linked the city with the Cripple Creek mining district. Around 1900, the short line carried ore, supplies, and passengers through narrow mountain tunnels. Later, the route became an automobile road, leaving the dark passages to collect echoes, graffiti, rumors, and stories. The most famous legend says one tunnel collapsed on a school bus full of children, and their spirits never left. Historians have not found records proving such a tragedy happened there, which makes the tale an urban legend. Still, visitors claim they hear laughter in the tunnels, then sudden screams, as if the mountain remembers a disaster. Some drivers repeat a ritual, stop inside the tunnel, put the car in neutral, and wait. The story says invisible children push the vehicle to safety, leaving tiny dusty handprints on windows or bumpers. Skeptics point to slope, dust, darkness, and suggestion. But at night, explanation feels weaker when the car seems to move by itself. The real history is railroad labor, mining traffic, rock cuts, and risky mountain travel. The legend adds a sorrowful face to that danger. When headlights strike the tunnel walls and the air turns cold, the road feels less like pavement and more like a memory. Number 19. Rufus of the Royal Hotel. Yampa, Colorado, early 1900s. The Royal Hotel stood on Moffett Avenue with a false front made to impress travelers. Thomas P. Lindsay began building it in 1903, and it served stage passengers, miners, timber crews, railroad workers, ranchers, and local families. In a small mountain town, a hotel could become half shelter, half gossip column, especially in winter. During the flu years around 1918 and 1919, local history says the building was used as a hospital when Yampa needed more beds. That is one root of Rufus's story. Some say he died there from illness. Others claim he was a gambler who met a bad end after cheating at cards. Either way, the name Rufus stuck to the upstairs rooms. Guests connected him most often with rooms 6 and 7. Lights flickered, on and off, toilets flushed with no one nearby, furniture shifted, boot steps crossed wooden floors and stopped just behind a person brave enough to turn around. Rufus sounded more mischievous than cruel, like a restless tenant who enjoyed reminding people the old hotel had not forgotten him. The Royal Hotel later burned in January 2015, but Rufus remains part of Yampa's memory. That ending makes the legend feel even stranger because the building that held his footsteps is gone. Maybe stories are what ghosts become when walls disappear. In Yampa, Rufus still walks on through the past, grinning in the hallway no one can enter anymore, still awake. Number 20. The Ghosts of the Brown Palace Hotel. Denver, August 12, 1892. The Brown Palace Hotel opened with sandstone, red granite, iron, and steel, a luxury downtown landmark shaped like a triangle. Henry C. Brown wanted one hotel grand enough for the growing city, and architect Frank E. Edbrook gave it an open atrium that still makes guests look up in awe before they speak, even today. The hotel welcomed presidents, performers, business leaders, and ordinary travelers who wanted to feel part of Denver's rise. With that much history, Ghost Stories found plenty of rooms to enter. One favorite tells of an old railroad ticket manager or conductor appearing near the ticket area, then walking straight through a wall as if the building forgot to stop him. Other stories drift from deeper inside the hotel. Workers have reported a baby crying near the basement or boiler room, even when no child is there. In Ellington's, once known as the San Marco Room, people have told of a phantom string quartet dressed formally and playing music after the living guests are gone for the night. What makes the Brown Palace legend powerful is its elegance. The ghosts do not belong to a ruin. They belong to polished brass, carved railings, tea service, and soft hotel carpets. When music seems to rise from an empty room or footsteps cross a quiet hall, Denver's past feels dressed for one more evening, refusing to leave before the final note fades into the marble air. Number 21. The Gumbaroo. Western lumber camps, early 1900s. The Gumbaroo belonged to the strange family of fearsome critters traded around fires after long days with axe and saw. Men described it as a black, bear-like animal with no fur at all, only smooth, rubbery skin. In Colorado timber country, that detail made the tale easy to repeat at night, especially when the woods were quiet. The creature was said to live in burned-over forests and hollow trees where the ground smelled of ash. Bullets bounced off its hide. Knives sprang back. Even falling branches could not hurt it. A hunter who thought he had found an easy target would hear the shot rebound and realize the forest had played a trick on him instead. But every impossible beast needs one weakness. For the Gumbaroo, it was fire. The same creature that could shrug off metal would explode if flames touched its body. That part made the tall tale feel like a warning from men who knew how fast dry timber could burn. One careless spark could turn a camp joke into real disaster in minutes. So the Gumbaroo is funny, but it carries a smoky kind of truth. It came from workers who lived with wild animals, sharp tools, and sudden forest fires. When a distant boom rolled through the trees or a campfire snapped too loudly, someone could grin and say the gumbaroo finally caught fire again. Number 22. The Ghosts of Cheeseman Park. Denver, 1858. The land now called Cheeseman Park began as Mount Prospect Cemetery, a burial ground set outside the young city. For decades it held pioneers, soldiers, immigrants, poor families, and people whose names were almost lost before Denver grew around them. By the 1890s, the cemetery had become neglected, crowded, and too close to town, a troubling neighbor for a growing city. City leaders wanted a public park, so families were told to remove their dead. Many could not be found, and many graves went unclaimed. Then came the scandal. Undertaker E.P. McGovern was hired to move bodies, but reports accused his crews of breaking remains apart and placing them into small coffins to earn more money per box. Work stopped, but not every grave was cleared. As paths, lawns, and trees replaced cemetery rows, the ground kept its old secret. Over the years, digging projects sometimes uncovered bones and coffin pieces, reminding Denver that the park's beauty rested on unfinished business. That real history gave the ghost stories a place to grow and stay. Today, Cheeseman Park is peaceful in daylight, with joggers, picnics, and wide green space. But at dusk, the story changes. People speak of shadowy figures, cold spot, and shapes moving where old graves once lay. Maybe it is memory, not ghosts. Number 23. The Ghost of Emily at the Avery House. Fort Collins, 1879. Franklin and Sarah Avery built their sandstone home on Mountain Avenue when the town was still finding its shape. Avery was a surveyor, banker, and water leader, the kind of man whose work helped turn a frontier settlement into a lasting community. The house stood elegant, warm, and full of family life near Old Town. Today, the Avery House is a museum, restored with period rooms, a carriage house, and quiet hallways that show visitors what late Victorian life looked like in northern Colorado. But local ghost lore adds another resident, Emily, a young woman said to have died in the 1880s and returned to the home she once knew, moving through rooms that still smelled of age and polished wood. Her story is not as firmly documented as the house itself, which makes the legend feel softer and more mysterious. Visitors have reported sudden cold breezes, the feeling of being watched, or a pale figure lingering near rooms where the air grows still. Emily does not seem angry. She seems almost shy, as if she is passing through memory. The building is not a ruin. It is a preserved home, filled with careful furniture and old family silence. If a chill slips through a room with no open window, people pause instead of run. They wonder if the past has simply brushed by, wearing the name Emily in a house that remembers and listens. Number 24. The Mystery of Snippy the Horse. San Luis Valley, 1967. A horse was found dead near Alamosa, and the story quickly escaped the pasture. Newspapers called her Snippy, though later accounts say her real name was Lady. The body looked strange to witnesses, Parts of the head were damaged. There seemed to be little blood, and odd marks near the site fed a rumor ready for the UFO age. Across America, people were already watching the sky, reading about flying saucers, and wondering what might visit lonely places at night. By October 1967, headlines turned the death into a mystery larger than one ranch. Some blamed extraterrestrials. Others whispered about secret experiments, cults, predators, or chemicals in the field. Investigators offered more ordinary explanations. Mainstream reviews found no solid proof of abnormal causes, and later reporting pointed toward earthly possibilities, including animal activity and even people tampering with the case. But the first image had already entered folklore: a dead horse, a silent valley, and a sky that seemed too wide and empty. That is why Snippy still haunts Colorado legend. It was not only what happened to the horse, it was the feeling that something had happened just beyond understanding. Her preserved skeleton eventually became part of San Luis Valley UFO tourism, turning a sad ranch mystery into a roadside memory. Number 25. Miss Kitty of the Palace Hotel. Cripple Creek, early 1900s. The Palace Hotel stood in a mining town built on sudden gold, gambling rooms, hard luck, and crowded streets. Among its remembered figures was Kitty Chambers, connected with the hotel during the years after 1908. Local history says she died in room 3, but the stories insist she never truly checked out, no matter how many years passed in town. Kitty's legend is not one of screams or slammed doors. She is remembered as a woman of hospitality, the kind of host who noticed small things. Guests say they have seen a female figure in white moving through the halls, sometimes carrying a candle as if making one last evening round. Then she fades before anyone can speak. The most charming part of the story is how domestic it feels. Blankets seem to be adjusted. Beds look tucked in more neatly than guests remember leaving them. A quiet presence passes near a room, not threatening, just busy. In a town famous for boom and bust fortunes, Miss Kitty's ghost seems to guard the gentler art of making strangers feel cared for. That is why she remains one of Cripple Creek's most beloved spirits. The Palace Hotel has changed with time, but the idea of Miss Kitty has stayed warm and human. If a candle-like glow crosses a hallway late at night, visitors do not imagine a monster. They imagine a hostess still working by memory, smoothing the covers before dawn, and never closing her door. Number 26. Father Dyer, the Snowshoe Itinerant. Colorado mining camps, 1860s, John Lewis. Dyer crossed the Rockies when many men came only for gold. Born in 1812, he had worked mines himself before becoming a Methodist circuit rider, so he understood the rough lives waiting in places like Leadville, Breckenridge, Fairplay, and Alma. Miners called him Father Dyer with affection. His famous snowshoes were really long wooden skis, sometimes described as 10 feet long. With them, he crossed Mosquito Pass and other brutal routes through storms that could bury a trail in minutes. He carried sermons, comfort, and U.S. mail because isolated camps needed letters almost as badly as they needed bread and tools. Dyer preached wherever people would listen, saloons, tents, cabins, or open streets. Sometimes miners paid him with gold dust. Sometimes they had nothing. He still went back because funerals, weddings, sickness, and loneliness did not wait for safe weather. In 1885, Colorado's Senate even made him its first chaplain, honoring his hard mountain work. He was a real man who fought snow, distance, hunger, and rough roads to reach people other ministers could not. Number 27. The Hide Behind. Deep in American logging country, late 1800s, men came back to camp with stories of something no one could ever look at directly. They called it the hide behind. It was said to follow workers through thick timber, always slipping behind the nearest trunk the second a man turned his head. You never saw it. That was the point. The creature belonged to the fearsome critters, campfire monsters invented by loggers, trappers, and woodsmen who lived in dangerous forests. A missing worker could mean a fall, a wrong turn, a bear, or a freezing night. But around a fire, someone could lower his voice and say, "The hide behind got him," and everyone understood the fear. The tale also carried rough humor. Some versions said the hide behind hated alcohol, which gave nervous loggers a joking reason to drink. Others claimed it was thin, fast, and strong enough to pull a man away before he could shout. The details changed from camp to camp, but the rules stayed the same. If you looked, it was already hidden. It turns the oldest fear of the woods into a shape, the feeling that something is behind you. When branches snap on a dark trail and the silence seems to move from tree to tree, the legend does its work. You look over your shoulder, see nothing, and somehow that makes it worse than seeing teeth. That empty space is what follows you back to camp after midnight. Number 28. The Spirit of Annabelle at St. Elmo. St. Elmo, Colorado, 1880s. The town began as a high mountain mining camp in Chaffee County, busy with rails, stores, hotels, and people chasing silver and gold. At its height, St. Elmo had thousands nearby. But when mines slowed and rail traffic faded, families left one by one. The Stark family stayed longer than almost anyone. Annabelle Stark grew up tied to the town's final chapter. By 1943, records note that only Annabelle and her brother Tony remained as full-time residents. Their family owned buildings, including business spaces connected with the old telegraph and hotel life. To visitors, she became a strange, lonely guardian of a place most people had abandoned. After Annabelle died in 1960, the legend said she kept protecting St. Elmo. People cleaning or working in old buildings claimed supplies were moved, objects were scattered, and tidy rooms were undone by morning. It sounded less like rage than stubborn ownership, as if she still disliked strangers changing the town she had watched decay. That is why Annabelle's spirit fits St. Elmo so well. The ghost town is not empty in the simple way ruins are empty. It feels paused, with curtains, porches, and dusty windows still waiting. Number 29. The Tall Tale of Uncle Fossil. Fort Collins, early frontier days, local folklore gave the town a mountain man named Uncle Fossil. He was not remembered like a polished hero, but like the kind of character people invent when a place wants a good laugh. The tale makes him an eccentric trapper roaming northern Colorado before streets, breweries, and college buildings changed the valley. Uncle Fossil wore a beaverskin hat and carried a cane made from a giant elk horn. That alone would have made him hard to forget. But the story added magic. He could supposedly speak with wild animals, understand their moods, and move through the woods as if every fox, bird, and squirrel had already warned him what was ahead. His loyal companion was a pet skunk named Stinky, which tells you the tale was meant to be playful. Fort Collins has serious history, from native homelands to military posts, farming ditches, and town builders. But Uncle Fossil belongs to the lighter shelf of memory. He turns old frontier roughness into something odd, funny, and easy to repeat. It reminds people that folklore is not always about death or terror. Sometimes a town keeps a silly old trapper because he gives the past a friendly face. In the whisper of cottonwoods near the river, you can almost picture him walking by, cane tapping, skunk trotting proudly at his boots. The old joke keeps walking there. Number 30. Mona of Pikes Peak. Pikes Peak Highway, 1932. The road up America's mountain was steep, narrow, and unforgiving, especially near Glen Cove and the high curves where weather could change fast. In local legend, a young woman later called Desperation Mona crashed near mile marker 13, her car plunging far below the roadway into the cold mountain dark. Some versions name her Winona Mona Roberts and say she survived the wreck at first, only to die weeks later under tragic circumstances. The details shift with the storyteller, as ghost stories often do, but the setting stays the same. Dusk on Pikes Peak, a woman at the roadside, frightened, shivering, and begging a driver to stop. The most repeated tale comes from the 1970s. A man reportedly saw her near the road, gave her his jacket, and helped her down the mountain. Then she vanished, leaving behind a clue tied to the old accident. Whether this was memory, prank, or classic vanishing hitchhiker folklore, the story found the perfect road to haunt. Pikes Peak is beautiful, but its cliffs remind every driver to stay careful. When the sky turns purple and headlights sweep across mile marker 13, the legend feels like a warning with a human face.
If you enjoy this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.